breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Brainstorming with Dr. Kolby Condos and Dr. Glenn Harrison, my main man on the other side. Today, we are going to be talking about hormones because a lot of our patients talk about whether they have hormone imbalances and issues like that. So we're going to break down a little bit about what hormones are, how they're used in the body, and how you get rid of them, and what can happen if you have imbalance, quote unquote, imbalances in that. If this is the first time with exposure to the channel, and this is your first time watching or listening, and you have questions on health concerns of your own, make sure that you turn on notifications and you hit like and subscribe so that when more information comes out about more of these health topics, you get that information as it comes out. So we're going to get started. But first, how's your week going, man? I know you've been super swamped.
It's going good. Yeah, I have been swamped doing everything from home. So it's interesting to see how it's a challenge just to maintain my own lifestyle balance. But my dog loves it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure, right? Well, it's difficult coordinating with your employees because they're at home too, and then you're trying to coordinate with your patients and all that. So it's just kind of new and challenging, but
it is,
right?
It is. It definitely exploits your weaknesses. That's for sure. But it's been good. It's been good. Covered a lot of ground and doing these exciting things. Even like this podcast we're going to talk about right now. I'm really excited about this. I know we were talking a little bit about before we came on. About how I'm doing different things in practice with regards to sex hormones and stuff like that and testing. So I think this is really neat stuff. We have all the pieces now, so we can actually deliver with hormone strategies. So
yeah, I think that, and even myself, I don't know that I don't know necessarily the due diligence is a good word for it, but I don't know that I use it as frequently as maybe I should. Maybe I look at it as after I've talked with you a little bit as like an aspect that I've overlooked a little bit in the past. So I think that even if this is your first time listening, or even if you are someone who uses this all the time, this is a good review, good refresher. And I think it's important that a lot of people, if they don't maybe have explainable answers, that this might be a component or a part of their condition for sure.
I completely agree. I think hormones can be a missing link. And, I never really dove into hormones in my practice till just in the last few years, or a couple of years. And we're learning more and more. We're learning, how to test them, how to find out the problems. And so many people that are struggling with, and they're told that, or they believe, or right in their paperwork, they say one of their complaints or concerns is hormonal disorders, hormonal imbalance. But really, what does hormonal imbalance mean? So I think we're gonna dive into that to start with. So, Dr. Kolby, what would you define as a hormonal imbalance, or someone maybe that's listening that would be labeling themselves as having a hormonal imbalance? What would that look like? What would they experience?
So actually, I think that maybe as I'm looking back on some of the notes and stuff we'd written, maybe explaining to people what hormones actually are would be a great start. So hormones are, and then I can dive down a little bit deeper about what you were just talking about. So hormones are a substance that's made within your body that actually has a desired effect. You look at your thyroid, and thyroid hormone is going to help with your metabolic rate. You look at insulin, and insulin is going to help with your ability to regulate blood glucose. You look at sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen, and those are reproductive hormones. So every hormone is produced with a specific intent. And when we look at hormone disorders or hormone imbalances, if you will, a perfect example of this could be people who have insulin resistance, where they have so much insulin that their body is surged in insulin production so much that their insulin receptor sites actually become resistant to insulin. So then it doesn't work. And this is how you can get things like diabetes or metabolic syndrome. Another issue would be like if your sex hormones are all out of whack and you're all of a sudden, you're a male and your testosterone is getting shunted into estrogen, and then all of a sudden you're putting more weight on, and some other issues with like maybe the distribution of your fat in your body can happen. Your energy level is not what it should be. Your libido goes down. So I think that people really don't know exactly that it may be a hormone, but they could strongly suspect it, right? Because they're like, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. I've eaten healthy. I'm doing this. And it's just not changing.
That's exactly what I see. I see people having multiple symptoms that can't put their finger on it. So then they just talk, it must be a hormonal imbalance. See it a lot with women. Well, you'll see with men, just women are more willing to say if they have a problem. Men aren't. Where they'll be, maybe they're having a period, but it's all over the map. There's a lot of pain, or they're losing hair, they're gaining weight. Maybe they have infertility problems. Those are kind of and mood disorders, changes and fluctuations in mood, but they can't quite pin it. And it's stubborn. I've even seen relationships being affected and breakups as a result of this, because, it wasn't the same person that they first met and they started dating or got married to. So it can really destroy lives. But that's how I'd interpret what people would experience with hormonal imbalances. Things just aren't right. They can't put their finger on one symptom, but it's kind of this group of bizarre symptoms.
And it seems like they're all over the map. I mean, I literally had a patient that came in and she's like, I feel like I'm bipolar. And it's like, I feel like I'm bipolar. I can be happy, sad. I feel like I have tons of energy and I'm super fatigued. And it was an issue with, with some hormones. In fact, we've talked about this in a previous podcast. This particular patient is one that suffered from that, but that's the thyroid. She had a huge thyroid issue where she wasn't making enough thyroid hormone because she had an autoimmune condition to that. So her thyroid hormone was swinging up and then swinging down. So it was huge fluctuations in the production of the hormone. And that was affecting not only her mood, but her energy too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And then I know you touched on a little bit, maybe you'll have a chance to touch on it again, but the effects of hormones on the brain.
It's for sure.
And I know you'll dive into that. But before we go down that rabbit hole of neuroendocrinology, there's rules of hormones. And I know we talked about this at the start and how we're going to lay out this. We're going to give a crash course on hormones in like just a few minutes. But the 3 rules of hormones: you have to make your hormone. You have to make it. That's going to come from some gland: thyroid gland, testes, ovaries, adrenal glands, whatever gland it is. And then so you have the gland. The gland is going to make the hormone. So you make the hormone from the gland. You use the hormone, and it creates the function, whatever it is. It's fertility or hair growth or energy production. And then once you use it, then you should lose that hormone. So that hormone that you use should flush out of the body. So you should make, you should use, and you should lose. If we want to really dummy it down. Now I know we talked about this, Dr. Kolby, of how we were going to explain this, and we thought maybe we'd explain it down in problems with making the hormone and using the hormone and losing the hormone, so people can have this, and you can apply these principles to any hormone. Absolutely any hormone. So, we can't go through, hundreds of hormones, but you understand the principles and you can apply it to yourself. So what are the problems that you see, Dr. Kolby, with making the hormone?
So basically, when I look at the patient or the body's ability to make the hormone, I look at it is it a signaling issue from the top down? Is it an issue with precursors to the hormone? Or is it an issue with that hormone is being produced so frequently that gland is physically unable to generate the production anymore? So in my practice, specifically because I see patients that have traumatic brain injuries, or they have issues with, concussions and stuff like that. A lot of the time when you look at the feedback loop that's associated with the production of hormones, it starts in your hypothalamus. So they call it your hypothalamic pituitary axis, right? So your HPA axis. You have this area of your brain that gives signals to your pituitary gland that lets out other precursors or other hormones like adrenocorticotropic hormone. You guys don't care about any of this, but it sends the precursors out that stimulates the glands, right?
So I'll just take a back step here. The brain is going to send a signal to the gland so the gland can do what it needs to do.
Exactly. Perfect. Okay. It's like
perfect.
Super dumbed down, right?
Okay. So yeah. So okay.
The brain sends sends a signal to the gland for the production of hormones. Well, what can happen if you have like a TBI or something like that is actually can cause changes to your hypothalamus. So then you have an issue with stimulating those glands coming from the top down. Your brain is not doing as well, or it could be overdoing it. Most of the time you see it not performing as well as it should. So then you see an issue with hormone production. And that would be the first type. Okay. The second type would be that you don't have the precursors for that specific hormone, right? And that can be the A, you're not getting the stimulus from the brain, or B, your diet or other factors are leading to either you not having the precursors or the precursors being pushed somewhere else. So
That's
basically,
right.
you don't have the raw material to produce the hormones to begin with.
And one of those things, just to interrupt here, the raw materials are all cholesterol. Cholesterol's been demonized, and you get a lot of these men and women that are running a zero cholesterol diet because they think it's good for them. They don't have the raw product to make the hormone. So then they end up with all these hormonal problems at a young age. So just to slide that in there. So there's a dietary component to it.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, cholesterol is your friend.
Then
Believe
you
it
look
or
at
not.
people who like certain groups that have, follow specific diets, and then you can see why there's issues with that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So issues with the feed down from the brain, issues with having the precursors to produce the hormones, and then 3 being a fatigue rate. So if, say, for instance, you are chronically stressed and you are producing cortisol all the time, well, eventually your adrenal glands are going to be like, I'm not doing it anymore. Like, I've been working triple overtime. Like, I haven't stopped running since last January. Like, I'm not doing it. And then that's when you see people who, maybe have certain signs and symptoms associated with hormonal insufficiency. So to recap, issues with feed down from the brain, issues with building blocks or precursors, and issues with fatigue or the inability to generate a hormonal response.
Okay, perfect. So that's obstacles with making the hormone. Now challenges with using the hormone. So we have to be able to use it. And you hit on a little bit of this, Dr. Kolby. Most people that are watching this or listening to this, they heard of insulin resistance with diabetics. And it's where their blood sugar is really high because their body doesn't feel insulin anymore. And their body should make the hormone, insulin. Pancreas should make it. And insulin's job is to clean up the blood sugar out of the blood. But if there's huge amounts of insulin in the body, the insulin has to push a button, a receptor, on the tissue to let the insulin do its job. But if insulin is hitting that button, you become numb to the insulin. And that's numb to the hormone, insulin resistance. You can be resistant to any hormone in the body. I've seen it in bodybuilders where people these men are competitive bodybuilders and they're using testosterone injections all the time. And they get benefits from it. And then it gets to a point where their body doesn't recognize the testosterone anymore. They become numb to it. Even though their testosterone levels keep climbing in their blood, it's not having an effect. So that's one way you can lose the ability to using the hormone is bombardment, excess for whatever the reason, being a junkie, an insulin junkie, a testosterone junkie, or whatever, cortisol junkie, maybe even thyroid. So this is where bioidentical hormones can be a problem. Any kind of hormone, external hormone coming into the body create this problem. You need to go for more and more and more and more hormones. So that's the biggest one why I see people can't use it. I see another one that creates a problem, and that's where toxins block the activation of the hormone. And that's,
or even, so I'm going to interrupt you a little bit. Sorry, but even if you consider like estrogen and plastics, right? So it can be places that you're getting these identical, not necessarily identical, but things that mimic your natural production of hormones, and it can mess with you too, because I've seen that in my patients where they come in, they've got like an estrogen dominance issue, they're stuck with all of this estrogen in their body, and you look at it and they're microwaving plastics, they're drinking a ton of like really acidic drinks that have been floating around on the floorboards of their car, like all that stuff. You don't think about it, but
it's
like,
true. Even the Starbucks, the cap on a cup at Starbucks, or these coffee cups, it's being heated. That's one of the cheapest plastics, the most volatile plastics ever. That stuff's getting in your coffee. And when you talked about estrogen dominance, these are estrogen mimicking chemicals, also known as xenoestrogens, and they're maybe you've heard of endocrine disrupting chemicals. That's really what they're doing. And these plastics, and it's not only plastics, it can be all sorts of airborne chemicals. They build up, and personal care products, they build up and build up and build up, and they act like estrogen. They do everything bad that estrogen does: weight gain, mood disorders, problems with period, hair problems, all of these different things, but none of the good things: soft skin, the fertility, the all of that. And so that's a great, another reason how you can't use your hormones if there's some other chemical jumping in and acting
it's
like
mimicking it. Yep.
mimicking blocking that
Yeah.
receptor button. So that would be maybe a problem of not using. Now, Dr. Kolby, what would you say would be the third problem with hormones? And that would be, if we're talking about problems, of the inability to lose. So remember, we got to make, we got to use, we got to lose.
Yeah, sure. So then you get like the buildup, and that again, that maybe is a good segue with what we just talked about, where you're getting more exposure than you really know that you're getting, from plastics or whatever, like you just talked about, the hair care products or the chemicals. But then also, you look at your ability. We talked about hormones being cholesterol, so your ability to break them down and then get rid of them when you're done with them. So if you have issues with your liver and stuff like that, that can be huge as far as your ability to get rid of and clear. And break down all these hormones too. So then you have them floating around, so less of the hormone does more. And that's
and then you become numb to the hormone, like we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing. Like a perfect example of this is like diabetics that use insulin, but they don't alter their diet, and they just, I just ate a bunch of sugar, I'll just take more insulin. Well, eventually that's not going to work. And basically what happens then is that it just floats around in your body and does more damage than it does good once you lose your sensitivity to that hormone. We don't want that to happen with all the hormones. But that's just one that people are really aware of, because then you get things like diabetic neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy. There's a ton of them, because then all of a sudden unregulated sugar is floating around in your bloodstream because you've lost your sensitivity to the insulin.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that would be the inability to lose, and detoxification is one of the biggest things to that. Like you talked about, the clearance. So the liver is a big player in that. So that's where problems with the making, the using, the losing. Now those are problems, but what would some of the symptoms be? How would somebody know maybe that their problem is they aren't able to make the hormone? What would you see?
So if they're not able to make the hormone, I mean, it depends on the hormone. We've talked about this a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, for instance, we'll use thyroid because we've done this before. And if you have questions about thyroid, we did a 3-part series about this previously, and you can look at that information.
It's super thorough.
That one we broke it into 3 parts because we went over common signs and symptoms, and we went over lab work, and then we went over maybe some steps that you could implement in your day-to-day life. But for instance, just for like thyroid, if you have periods where you are super fatigued, or you're losing your hair, or you have unexplainable weight gain, like all of these are just like little blinking lights that are like, hey, you need to investigate this. So that's one that's really, really common for me. People who have migraines. I had people with like estrogen dominance sometimes can get like a lot of migraines. They can have irregularity with their periods. They can have like, heavy flow, no flow, depending on like what the status of their estrogen load is. So those are the 2 that we see really commonly in our office. Or, I mean, it could even be like weight gain. If you have an issue with building testosterone, and then all of a sudden you're pushing it into estrogen, and you're a male, then you're going to have weight gain. You could have, increased adipose tissue on your breast area or your chest. I mean, there's a ton of stuff. It can be all sorts of signs and symptoms.
So that's kind of to summarize that. Really bizarre symptoms that are happening all over the body could be an inability to make it, but and then everything downstream slows down.
Yes.
I don't see it too often where we aren't able to make it, specifically to sex hormones. Thyroid I do see, but not necessarily with sex hormones. Usually it's too much of an excess, which when you talked about xenoestrogens. So that's problems with making it. Now problems, or I should say symptoms of not being able to use it. Well, naturally, if you can't use it and it builds up, we've already been through this, we become desensitized to the hormone. And that's if we're not able to use it, meaning it takes more and more hormone to have the same effect. And you'll see that, I see it all the time with thyroid medication, where people are taking more and then more and then more, and they become numb to it. You see with insulin resistance, they take more and more and more to keep their blood sugar down. We'll see it with even bioidentical hormone replacement, whether that's testosterone or in men and women, or progesterone. Those are the 2 big ones that they like to, bioidentical hormone. They have to give more and more and more to have the same effect. So there's something what I like to call the honeymoon phase of hormones. When they first take them, they have the best effect. They feel great. And then things get sour in the relationship. Things start to come down. And then they go back in and say, oh, well, you're due for your hormone. Oh, okay. And then they get a little bit of a lift, but it's never as good. It's never as good. So it's usually not too little hormone, it's not having them balanced. So that would be maybe some symptoms of inability to use them. Now, Dr. Kolby, what would be some symptoms of inability to lose your hormone?
So if you I mean, I keep coming back to thyroid, but I think that one's probably just the easiest because a lot of people have those signs and symptoms associated with thyroid issues. So for instance, if you have like, too much, your heart could be racing. All of a sudden you're growing hair in weird places that you normally didn't grow it. You have heart palpitations, you're sweating, you're anxious. It's affecting your mood. You're jittery.
Yeah.
I mean, those are all signs and symptoms of excess.
And maybe you could specify of what some of these common symptoms in a man versus a woman would be. Like if a woman has an excess of, if she's starting to, not burn up her, or if she's converting her estrogen into testosterone, that's an excess because estrogen's been building. What would you see in a woman?
Then you're going to get like facial hair. You can get like facial hair growth. I mean, that's one of the bigger ones that, that females come into. I'm growing hair on my lip, or, I'm having to bleach my hair on my face a lot more than I was previously. Those are all issues. You look at the sex drive, their libido is going to change. Those are two biggest ones that I see in my office.
Those are some of the common ones that I see as well, where the male pattern hair growth is a big one. A coarser voice, more of a deeper voice in women, and then a lot of times the medical doctors say, well, it's just menopause that happens. Not to that extreme, because you'll see some.
Should not happen.
Yeah. And in men, what do you see in men?
So if you're pushing testosterone into estrogen, then you're gonna see like, the men who have like maybe like more fat over their pecs.
Yeah.
You're gonna see more feminine type stuff. The hair loss.
A lot of times it's labeled as andropause.
Yeah, andropause. Yep. Or gynecomastia is another one where they have excess estrogen. So, you see the fat distribution changes in men.
To summarize, you'll see male physiology or male physique morph more into feminine, and you'll see female physique morph more into masculine.
Yep.
It works opposite, and it's the accumulation of the hormone and the inability to clear. So if that's the problem, so if we're trying to stay punctual with this, what do you see? And I know there's only one solution, if it ever is, the conventional medical approach to hormonal dysfunction.
Yeah, so I mean, you see a lot of
in 3 words or less.
Yeah, hormone HRT, right?
There you go. 3
hormone
letters.
Replacement therapy. And I'm not saying that that's not always appropriate, because in some cases it is appropriate. But then there's also times where you look at it and you're like, it's kind of a Band-Aid, and you want to figure out why they're starting to have that to begin with.
That's right. I think I talked about it in a podcast before. I can't remember where I talked about. There's a tug of war between these hormones, and in women, a common tug of war is estrogen and progesterone. And what happens is that natural estrogen and the toxic estrogen keeps building and building and building and building, and then they go in for the progesterone, shots or pellets or whatever. So then they push it up and they feel better because they're inhibiting the estrogen. That's weight and period and fatigue, and then what happens? The lifestyle continues. And then the estrogen starts building, and then they feel crappy again. Then they go into their progesterone. So they're steady chasing it. And you'll see it with men and testosterone and estrogen. Men, they'll go in for their testosterone injections, bigger, faster, stronger, but their lifestyle stays crappy, their diet, their everything else. Estrogen climbs up again. Then they say, oh, you're due for your testosterone. And then it goes higher and higher and higher. And in both scenarios, the female gets numb, gets resistant to the progesterone, so she needs more and more, and the man gets resistant to the testosterone. He needs more and more until it gets to a point where it doesn't do anything.
And then you also have to consider the consequences of those elevated levels in your blood. So then you look at things like, it could be osteoporosis or even like cardiovascular disease.
That's right.
Then those are other consequences that maybe aren't at the forefront of your mind when you are looking at this stuff, but that's stuff that happens later on down the line if this stuff is not addressed. So
that's right. And our HRT strategies, we're just starting to see the long-term effects of them now. They haven't been around long enough to really know what's happening. It's a big science experiment. It really is.
Right.
And
So say someone comes in, they suspect they have issues with their hormonal levels, or that they suspect hormonal dysfunction. What is your first step with them?
my first step, usually, like I think we talked about in other podcasts, we'll do an exam. So always the exam will involve some lab work to really have an understanding of their numbers. You know, what is their progesterone, testosterone, estrogen, DHEA? And we were talking about this at the start. I used to test all sorts of different ways. Now, some hormones I test with saliva, and some and others with blood. And it tends to be certain hormones have their shine better in certain mediums. So that's the first step. The lab test to find out, you know, what's going on. Is there a balance? And then that lays out a little bit of a strategy of how we're going to take it on. Mm-hmm. So that's the first. I imagine you do the same thing, Dr. Kolby.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty standard stuff. We've talked about this in the past, but I think that having all of the measurables is really important. So I always do the exam, a new patient exam, which always involves some sort of neuro exam, then blood work, and then I look into lifestyle and diet. You know what I mean? If there's someone who's eating really, really poor, that's something you're going to have to change probably. Or if you look at even, you know, with one of my patients that had excess estrogen and we found that in her blood tests, we looked at what she was, one thing that she was like doing every single day, at least twice a day, was she would reheat leftovers, and she was using things like, I don't even use it, but what's it, like Rubbermaid, not Tupperware.
Oh, wow.
She was using like the plastic Tupperware, right? Wow. So you consider that all of those xenoestrogens are leaching out of that plastic Tupperware, and it's in a microwave, which is making it way, way worse, right? It's hot, tons of microwaves, and then some of the food, like if it's tomatoes or like a red sauce or something like that, it's acidic, it leaches out even more. So that was something that, you know, we had to work on. And that was something that we only found through investigating like what her day-to-day activities look like. And, you know, we did some stuff to get her, you know, a little bit balanced out. We did some lifestyle changes, some exercise stuff, and she feels great. But that really shows you and outlines the importance of really getting to know the patient and doing the exam and doing the studies and doing the investigative work, because I mean, that's something that if I wouldn't have asked her a pointed question, it probably would not have come to light.
That's right. And that's customized medicine. And that's the only way you can get past any of these chronic illnesses. The cookie cutter, you know, come in and don't look at anything else. Don't look at any lifestyle. And here's your hormone and you're on your way. That just makes a repeat customer. And I'll tell you, and I know you know Dr. Kolby as well, where when people go on these hormones, the results can be dramatic. It's addictive.
Yeah. Because they feel better. I mean, ultimately that's what they want. They want to feel better, right? And they do get that initially, but it doesn't always last.
The honeymoon, and the honeymoon is strong. Oh man. It's your first love.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that you wanted to add, Dr. Kolby? I know we referred to thyroid a lot. I just want to remind everybody that's listening and watching the 3-part thyroid podcast, videocast series that we have previously. Look, it is great. It's any thyroid questions at all, or even if you're not sure, you think you might have a thyroid issue, that series will give you answers.
Yeah, that's definitely a good starting point to do that. And that you can find that on our YouTube channel, which is Brainstorming with the Docs, and then also on the podcast. If you found us, likely you already saw the channel, so just go back and check it out. We can provide some links to that as well in the description.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think I have anything else. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, you guys can email us. Our email is info@brainstormingwiththedocs.com. You can look on Dr. Glenn's website, which is drgharrison.com, or my website, which is northlakeschiropractic.com. Otherwise, stay tuned, because we'll be coming out with some new stuff in the future. So stay tuned.
That was awesome, Dr. Kolby. I look forward to the next one.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.